Now we're going to talk about some of the most essential lines and plans that you should follow whenever you're playing the English. So let's go with C4. Now, first of all, you need to understand that setting up a repertoire is never about learning many lines. Now, a lot of people think it is about that, and that's their mistake. It is really about doing something completely different. It is about setting up a good position which could further help you to enhance it and lead to a successful middle game. So there are different ways to do that, basically. Black has mainly three major choices. He's got e5, c5, and essentially anything else that doesn't involve these two moves. Now, of course, there are the deviations of e6 and c6, which is Nimzo and Slav, that do not allow the English. So I'm going to try to give you a couple of really good plans that you could follow and consider upon those variations. So let's start first of all with the standard c4 e5. What do we do about that? Now, when people do c4 e5, essentially the idea is that white plays knight c3. And of course, the plan is that we do g3. Now, rarely you're going to see English without g3. g3 is usually to bring over the bishop towards the g2, so it can control that long diagonal and eventually help white with his plan, no matter whether it's going to go into the center or whether it's going to go towards the queen side. Black has plenty of choices. One of the most common that people play is knight f6. So the idea being is that if white plays, or when white plays bishop g2, black goes g6 or d6. In this case, white has basically two choices. He can pick up knight f3, or play what I would consider a little easier, actually, and which is to play with e3. Now, e3 I think is a little easier because it sets white up for the play of knight to e2, and so in case black castles, white can very quickly do the move. Knight e2, he's gotten the control around the center, the d5 square too, and he's actually going to be able to build on that and further improve it. Like, for instance, we could see if black does go with a move of d6, white can simply castle short side. In case black plays with a move like bishop to the e6 in order to prep and do a move like d5, we could very quickly make the knight d5 move, preventing the black pawn from reaching out there, and thereby just giving us a great chance to advance on the queen side. So this is a great example to see how that's done. Imagine that we do set up that knight on the d5 square, which he basically cannot capture. And so if black plays with a move like queen to d7, white's going to do rook to the b1. I personally think this is a great structure, and there is a lot of value towards that. It's all usually about queen side. Now, rarely white plays on the king side, because king side is usually where black wants to go, where he would like to jump and attack. This is why white does not pick it up. He often chooses to play on the queen side, where he sets up a positional play, which, even though it may look a little slow, ultimately has more value because it's straightforward, it's without obstacles, and whenever black tries to make a move like f5 or anything like that, white is in a good condition to play alongside f4. This will be a great move because it blocks the black pawn and it brings white an essential formation for attack. He's got things that will help him. If black does c6, which usually happens in this theory, white is ready to do an exchange, takes, and knight dc3. The open line out there always helps in one way or another, so white is ready. So this is overall the main idea, but let's see how the theory progresses. When white plays rook b1, now the theory suggests that the most common move for black is actually a5. This is a very sensible move because it kind of cuts off white's ability to play b4, and black would like to keep some value on that side. So what should white do? Well, as soon as a5 is being played, white can do plenty of things, but of course knight e to c3 makes more sense, being able to protect the center. And so when black does knight d8, this is the time where white could even do a move like bishop to the d2. he could actually gather that bishop around the queen side, and eventually that will help out when we think of moves like a3 plus b4. That is actually the pretty idea White's preparing himself towards. This is good. Now what about black? Well, actually, in many occasions, black tries bishop to h3, which is okay. The exchange is not that dangerous, as we're going to take. Now this forces a little bit of an extra problem to the actual c7 that he's a little weak at. And then, for example, right at this moment, when we actually come up with a move like that, in fact, we have everything. Great possibilities and a really nice way to follow. Just after that, apparently what black might want to do is just bishop to the d8 so he could defend. But it's okay, because in fact after that move, black may do a move of bishop to the g2. So this is very, very important. And so what we could do in this type of position, is after bishop takes g2, king takes to the g2, f5, and now this is essentially what could lead white up to playing a move of probably a move like b3 or something. So it is good. I'm not going to say to you that this is a perfect lineup, but in case black plays with the move of queen g7, there is bishop c3. The build-up always works on the queen side, because this is where white would like to advance. But the most important thing is the difference between the knight on the d5 and the bishop on d8, which are two very special, different pieces. So this is very, very important out there. And see, all we'd like to do is focus our attention on just building up, setting the play, and keeping the pressure and the attack forward. If black does a move of bishop to the opponent to the g5, white can always do f4. Don't forget that this is always one of the best opportunities to pick up. And of course, given that black can't do this, if he plays g takes f, e takes f, we have the e5 that's actually being pinned. We've got the black bishop on the d8, which is really tied down a little bit behind. And I don't want to say that this is good or bad. I just want to say it really looks very fine for white, this whole position. And the setup that's being prepared and built up, that is also something pretty important. So yeah, this is what you want to achieve when you play with white in this structure. Now, what about knight f3? If you're a fan of the knight f3 line, that is okay. There's nothing that you've got to be wondering about. So eventually the idea is after knight f3, black often plays d6, and in case of the move d6, then of course white can castle short. Black can castle short. White can play rook b1, a-pop, and we have the same approach, more or less. It's very much the same thing, with the only difference that once white plays b4, a takes to b, a takes to b, bishop e6, and b5, should the black knight move down to e7, this is the time where white can play bishop to b2. And now we see the white knight isn't as flexible as it usually is on another square, but then he can go to the d2, and it can help white by opening up the road for his bishop. There is plenty of things that white could do in order to manage his game well, and so he's quite in a good condition to do it. What about black? Well, black's feeling backward. Not necessarily terrible, but definitely a little backward with his pieces, and that gives white options. It gives him opportunities. Let's say black plays queen to the d7, the white can even do a move like knight to the d2 in this position, and we get b7. If black plays rook b8, we can do rook to the e1, bishop h3, bishop h1, and it's wonderful. The setup helps, and it gives you the chance to understand everything's supposed to go on the queen side, that despite being or looking a bit slower, provides white with a great potential, for the simple reason that there is a great target out there, and white would really want to reach it in different ways. What about black's other versions of how he can play? I mean, truth is that sometimes black can play knight f6, and after g3, potentially he plays d5. Now, a lot of people find that uncomfortable because they can't have this safe structure that they're used to. In this particular case, I recommend that you take the pawn and then you do bishop g2. And the reason why I like this structure a lot is because it's almost like we're playing the Sicilian with reverse colors, but an extra tempo and a little less active, in fact, quite less active position for black, which is a great deal. When we play like this, black could do the move of, actually you can come up with quite a few moves. Let's say he plays knight b6, castles, bishop e7, a3, castling, and b4. And then we suddenly realize there is b5 in that type of position. There is going to be a great challenge against the c6 and maybe the e5. And it's a cool move. It really stands out pretty good. What about black? Well, black can play bishop e6, intending to provoke us for b5, so he can do knight d4. But it's not a problem because we're not going to attack him all that quickly. We would love to make a move like, say, pawn up to the d3 and kind of give ourselves a little bit of action speed. We could think of bishop to the e3. We could think about, like other moves to do. And that is great. And so this is the perfect idea. So like actually after that, it's all terrific. If black plays with a5, white's going to do b5, knight d4, knight to the d2. We've got an extra tension, good challenge against the b7, and after c6, we can play b6 to the c, knight to the c6. All of this is really opening up the play on the proper side of the board because we're really up to go and advance on the queen side. And it always kind of helps more or less because that's what we really need. Pressure, challenges, and keeping black down behind. If you do this, you're great. Now, of course, black's got plenty of ways to fight that. I mean, one of the things is you can play a4, bishop takes the c6, b takes the c6, queen c2, which could cause some weaknesses. Yet, the truth is that, like white has a pretty solid position. Everything feels sound and fabulous. Black has a bit of a problem both on the a4 and c6, so this is a little bit of an issue. Not much actually to worry about. And okay, so that's the great way to play it. Less to worry, more to do, and of course we're getting the ability to play maybe next move with knight e4 plus knight c5 may be great. The bishop and the rook can quickly come out as well. So white is pretty good. Pretty terrific, in that way. What about black? Well, he also has a fine game. It's just that he can't quite do or deliver any real threats just yet. So that's an important point to mention. It's a great thing. And after queen to the c7, white can do a move like, say, knight c to e4. We've got that knight getting ready to play at the c5, and we're having the possibility to jump in, attack black, and create plenty of really severe problems against this position. So it's good enough. May not be perfect, but it's good. Of course, there are plenty of other ways on how this can happen. There's a lot of theory out here, and the truth is you don't need to know most of the theory. You just need to know what you're supposed to do. My favorite plan is never with the rushed b4. My favorite plan is with the bishop e3, where black could even restrict with a5, and yet we know that the plan is going to be with the pieces. This is one of my favorite ideas. Setting up the pieces right so that they can actually build towards a better position. So we can now have the ability to line everything around the C and closing it up against black. Now, of course, we'll figure out how to do it later, but for now, it does look really good. So after the rook is placed out on the c1, queen is put on a very active place at the a4, and there is so much value in this position for white. I guess it wouldn't even take too long to prove it correct. Let's see. As soon as that move is played, black actually just can pick up the move of rook e8 or rook to the d1. Everything you build must be built and set out towards the middle. Most chess players are not going to do that, but that doesn't matter because it is the middle of the board where we would want to focus. And with more pieces there and enough firepower, we could quickly open up with d4 and make something more out of it. It's true. Just white can even play moves like queen to the b5 and others to reach out. Whether it's going to be b7 or d5 or e5, it doesn't matter so much because truth is white has the potential. Black actually has a little bit just to struggle with. Now that doesn't mean that this is the most perfect line for white. Of course, there are its own problems for sure. But it is pretty interesting. And I mean, when you think about it, it's something that will definitely make black to feel a little more concerned starting out. And so this is one of the plans you might want to adopt playing this as white. Now let's see what other variations exist out there. In certain lines, basically what black could choose to do is to play. So what black could do is c5. Now this is what we often see, c5, in many games. Now that does not mean it is good or it is bad. It simply means that it's a different line and we have to play it well. First thing that's very important about this type of line is that white sets up with knight c3. So in case of knight c6, white can do g3. Now, why is this important as a variation? It is important because next move white can deliver the bishop with the g2, and you could see that in a way by setting up the bishop on the g2, bishop g7, and especially a move like d3 or e3, white's getting ready for a nice structure that will help him to have at least the same vibe as in some of the other variations. That doesn't mean that it's going to be great, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, but what it means is that it is going to be pretty easy to follow with. And I like this for white. It's not great, just consistent and good looking. What's going to happen after the move of, let's say, pawn to e3 is played? Well, I suppose, not necessarily saying this has to happen, but I suppose black would do e5. Knight g2 and knight g7. Now, by no means this suggests that white is winning. He's not winning. But he's got a comfortable formation. He knows what to do and where the pieces are supposed to go. And oftentimes, this is more important than anything else. So what white is doing now is he's going to go for a short castles, and then in this case, perhaps play with a3. Black can do bishop e6, knight d5. That kind of move of knight d5 is especially important and useful when black intends to play this himself. Because not only that we block it, but this move helps white to open up many of the possibilities, many of the resources for each and every one of the white pieces. And that matters a lot. For example, queen d7. Rook b1. Should black choose to exchange on the d5, he'll end up giving away his valuable bishop that he needs to keep or preserve for the sake of that knight, and if he doesn't want to do that, he might actually choose to play instead bishop h3, going for the trade of g2. But that's also quite okay because white can play knight c3, exchange and retake. Don't be afraid of losing the bishop on g2. It's not that this bishop is going to be not bad, not that great, but I mean, like, even if you lose it, even if he exchanges it, I mean, it still doesn't change anything. We carry on with the play on the queen side like nothing has happened. Until black breaks down the king side position, which is very difficult, by the way, nothing should stop us from being able to advance, reach out, and attack in different ways. And that is the truth. It's other things that may also take place, but we don't care about most. Like you could see now, for example, in case of g5, there could be b takes the c, d takes the c, queen to h5 taking place, and in case black tries something like h6, we could do different things, starting with h4 even is a nice idea, or e4. What I'm trying to say is that there is no fear that must stop you or make you feel uncomfortable about anything going on the king side. Simply know that there is a lot of difficulty and predicament before he's able to reach out and attack on that area. You will use that and turn this to your advantage. That is the whole main idea of the opening, and this is what we want to achieve with white. It is very hard or challenging for black to oppose this, really. This is the thing. And that's one of the reasons why white can make it work, actually, because he is better prepared and set out. Of course, this is not the only way. Again, I'm showing you a couple of different plans so you can pick up between them. A lot of people love the idea of playing knight f3, so that after e6, there they have the move of d4. That is including me. This is one of my favorite lines. And it's because once white plays with d4, when black does c6 to the d, knight x to the d, knight f6, and possibly e4, this could very easily lead to what I would call the Maroczy bind. The Maroczy bind is a really interesting opening. The main idea of it is that basically we get ready to expand, and upon black playing d6, we can do bishop e2, knight takes d4, maybe even queen takes to the d4 would help out quite a bit. And it is indeed very comfortable position. Now, but that doesn't mean we're winning. No. Like if you say to someone that the Maroczy is winning, the truth is that it is not winning. And that's okay, because what we really need is basically a way to develop our pieces quick, keep them steady, force as much as we can towards that area of the board. I'm talking about maybe the king side. And just keep on playing there. You know, we don't want any real complications or anything. We just want a comfortable position with a resource that will eventually help us to expand. Maybe through a move like knight to the d4, that too could help. We can have knight b6 if he plays queen takes to the d2, king takes to the d2, and then in case black does knight d7, white can do a move like pawn to g4. And what is so great about that one move is that actually white can even focus on playing h4, h5. We could exchange. We're keeping black down so he cannot make a move like pawn to the b5 on his own. And while white will keep going, he could pretty quickly utilize his pieces and power to advance against the black king, hold up the pressure there and make black worry. This is what we need. f5, don't worry, edix f. And of course, we can always play with the move h3. It's a great move because it defends everything, it keeps the position strong and together, and it's perfect. So, for instance, rook f8, f4. The English opening can transform in many different ways, and that's not a bad thing. On the contrary, I'd consider that a lot of times it is good. You just have to know that every single time if you want to be successful with this opening, you must make sure that you can keep the advanced, the capable positions of your pieces, and that's a great thing. What we see now is exactly this. If black does f takes g, there's going to be h takes the g. We see clearly that there is going to be moves like f5, and because of the pawn structure that white has gotten, it helps him brilliantly to look forward to playing moves like f5 and others that will be great. It will drive black's bishop out of the way. It will help white to expand by maybe playing a move like bishop h6. And it will help us to deliver more problems or threats over black's position than we can, imagine. And this is a great deal of power. What I'd like to tell you is that this is good. And we're not talking about, okay, is this like a super great idea? Is it gonna be winning? No, not at all. It's just good because of the version on how white can make it. So it's pretty easy that way. Black is going to sit back. He is going to stay behind for the most part, not enjoying most of his own pieces and possibilities. And while he's going to struggle, certainly after that, if black plays rook to the d8, white can even do knight c3. He can come up with knight d5. Here's one type, not too many, just one type of position, which could be very... So you could see different ways of handling these systems. But sometimes people wonder, okay, this is good. This is all good. What if people play against me, say knight of 6 and whatever in this case? I have to tell you, first and foremost, like one of the most valuable things is do not worry. Unless your opponent goes with the Slav or a Nimzo approach, there is nothing you can do to stop your English. You can still go g3, bishop g2, knight f3, d3, e3, d4, in any way you want to do it. But on occasion, people can play moves like e6. Now, the truth is that e6 does lead to something different. We can play ready or whatever. My favorite response is the Catalan. And I do know that this is a different opening that we're not going to cover now, but consider learning it. It's a great way to set things right. Or, eventually, if people play c5, one of the ways is to actually transfer it into the reti. So when people do this, exchange takes, and we can play even d4, kind of tirage. These are transpositions. If you want to play pure English, you could probably go e4. Plan is that if he plays d5, you could possibly do e5. Drive his knight out of the way. Maybe we can play c6 to the d, and as a result, d4. It could help quite a bit to protect that pawn, and so after that type of continuation, we can have c5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. The value of this is actually within the pawn on e5. In my opinion, by keeping that pawn right there for so long, we're going to get a strong control. I'm not just talking about like, hey, look at this, white's actually standing pretty well. Yes, he is, but it is not about that at all. You see, so in fact, actually what is very important is that we set up, we have the control, and we are able to build on that a little bit more so that things work. And they do. They actually do. Black plays the move a6. Then we're going to even exchange it if needed and if necessary. And as a result of the exchange, white can just castle short to, like castle with his king. Plan for a move like rook e1 is very easy to manage, and so on and so forth. It is easy. And what I like about it is that it still fits, so we don't deviate from the main line of action. We are still very much within the English opening. That's what it is all about. Now, in particular, people do Slav. Now, playing with e4 really that early is not going to help so much, and you know why. For which reason, we actually choose to play differently. We could play, instead of e4, we can do now a double fianchetto system. Now this is we could say it's part of anything, but I believe that it's a good part of the English. Just make sure that you can command the good squares of d4, e5. Controlling those squares is fairly important, because if you can make the g3 and those moves, now maybe you can play d4, or you don't actually have to. What I like about it is the setup. It's a flexible setup, and a version in which you can make d3, knight d2, a3, b4, sometimes e4 or d4 at the right time when you think it's proper. And when you go for this whole thing, you will have what I would call a very convenient, solid position with little less to worry. Does English give you the perfect structure that you always need and want to have an advantage as white? No, it does not. But what it does, here's what I'm telling you, what it does is it gives you flexibility. Like no other opening can give you that much of an easy way of playing and setting up your pieces so you can eventually get to counter the opponent. These are my thoughts on what you can do with the English. I hope that makes sense, and I'll speak to you next time.